Hey, great to have you here. Hope you guys have had a happy holiday. We just recently got the release of Squid Game Season 2. I figured, why not binge this and give a brief discussion on it and just give my overall thoughts and review the season as a whole. I watched actually the original season of Squid Game not too long ago, actually this past week or so. I watched the first episode back when it came out, but wasn't really feeling it. I felt like it was a little bit darker tone than I was looking for at the time, so didn't wind up really watching it when everyone was watching at the time. So recently gave it a watch for the entirety of the season and thought it was overall decent. I probably would put it somewhere between that 6 out of 10 to 7 out of 10 range-ish overall. I'm generally a fan of those types of shows or movies, though, where you have kind of that game element where it's like a Saw game or Escape Room or even like Circle is an example on Netflix. Not The Circle, like the reality show, but a movie called Circle where you're just eliminating people through various games. So those are always just interesting mechanics as far as how they operate and seeing people get knocked off one by one and seeing who makes it to the end and how it really plays out. So those things are generally slightly of interest to me. It feels like they entertain me. They at least keep me along for the ride. Whether or not I really highly praise them or not is a different story, but they're at least somewhat intriguing to me personally. So with this one, obviously, it's been a while since we had the first season, and really the hype kind of died down, so I'm curious to see how much it builds back up from season 2. I know they're really marketing this one. They're pushing like their app game as well too, so we'll see on how well this one performs, but just going to overall give some high-level non-spoiler thoughts, give a review score, then quickly kind of run through the plot and give my thoughts here and there along that as well. So starting off with characters, I felt like overall the protagonists, or like the nice people in the season, were pretty strong. I felt like they were at least comparable to season 1. Some areas they may have even been stronger. I thought number 456 was a strong lead in this one. Obviously, he was the protagonist in season 1, but it feels like he gets more confident towards the end of that season, and he really carries that through the entirety of season 2. I'm probably not going to get super into names. There's just so many characters in here, so I'll probably just reference him and then the front man as well as really the two main characters that are carrying this season overall. So as mentioned, I feel like the characters overall were really strong on the protagonist side. Villains, however, I feel like were a little bit weaker in this season. Unless you want to count the front man as a villain, he's kind of mixed. He's a bad guy, but he's infiltrated with the good guys. We'll get more into that detail a little bit later on. But as far as the straight up, this guy's a villain from start to finish, feels like they're a little bit weaker in this season compared to the prior season. In the prior season, you have like the large, bulky guy who's really an intimidating presence. This one felt like they went for maybe a more modern type character where he's just a younger, thinner character where he's just not that overwhelming, scary presence, and he just does a lot of talking and doesn't really have much to back it up. It felt like that character in his group overall was not as strong as far as being an intimidating opponent in the actual games themselves, which maybe that's realistic. You get some variety as far as you're not always going to have this massive dude as far as the main opponent who's just constantly trying to battle you. This one's a little bit different with the approach they take. It was reasonable, but I feel like I prefer the first season when it came to those characters. But I will say, as mentioned, the protagonists and the people that we're rooting for were very strong in the season. The plot overall, I feel like it's a little bit hard to do a repeat of an interesting concept. I'm going to give another example with Saw for this one. When you came out with Saw, it was such a unique concept. You have a twist ending, and then you had Saw 2 come out, and surprisingly, they hit the mark with Saw 2, in my opinion, as well. Doing that, though, is such a challenge, especially when you have a unique concept as far as having this game being played. Obviously, you've done it once, so how do you do it again in a compelling way that people are still interested in finding out what happens? And I think they do a pretty good job here. As mentioned, they make the character development really matter. They make you invested in the characters, even though, you know, obviously some characters aren't going to be as impacted. The ones that do get impacted, you feel for them, and you begin to like them as the season progresses as well. As far as the plot goes, I won't go into too much detail here, but obviously we end season 1 with number 456 out for revenge, and we start a little bit slow with that storyline, but it really picks up when we get to the Squid Game portion of things. So for the most part, I feel like for the plot, they do pretty much as well as you can do in a sequel, because you're repeating a lot of the same notes here, and it's hard to do that and be effective. So they do some of the same things, they do some varieties, so I think they do a good job balancing between those two things. The special effects overall are pretty strong. It's pretty much what you expect from season 1. I would say same amount of violence that we have here with people getting shot left and right, so a lot of that taking place here. The games here are pretty serviceable in my opinion. They're somewhat basic, and there's really not much complexity to any of the games that take place. but I feel like that's fine. They really still find a way to build tension in those games despite them being relatively straightforward, and I think they get the point across. I'm not someone who really needs these overly complex things. Like, speaking of Saul, once again, I don't need this really convoluted trap where somebody's going to be, massacred at the end. I'm fine with the more mind-gamey one where it's like, oh, you had to think about it this way, and that would be the best way to get out of the situation. So I felt like overall games weren't overly creative, but they were effective, in my opinion. When it comes to the secondary plot where you have the cop and the team that are trying to track down the bad guys, I felt like that subplot was a little bit lacking, in my opinion. I assume it's really going to be more relevant in Season 3, and I'll talk more about that later, but that seems like something they're trying to build towards and not necessarily something that they really developed in this season specifically. And then finally, I feel like they did do a good job as far as making a unique twist on the games as far as the rules here, and we'll get more into detail with that, but they ultimately leave us with a cliffhanger and kind of a heartbreak scene to end off the season, so definitely going to be looking forward to what comes next when it comes to Squid Game. So overall, for a score for this one, I'm going to give Season 2 of Squid Game a 6 out of 10. So an above average season, definitely recommend checking out, especially if you watched Season 1 and enjoyed it. I think this one's definitely marginally comparable, maybe slightly less in some ways, but it's definitely comparable in my opinion. You're not going to be disappointed watching this one if you really like Season 1. Those are my thoughts overall. Above average season, and definitely something I recommend you at least watch. It's a pretty easy, quick binge because it's only actually 7 episodes, so relatively short compared to some other shows that you may have out there. So with that, we're going to now jump into the spoiler section where I'm going to give some more detail as far as my thoughts on certain plot points and just what took place throughout the entire season. So we pick up Season 2 with 456 really hunting down the guy who conned him into joining in Season 1. The guy who's like in the subway playing that game with him where they're throwing the bags down. And they're really hunting him down. And eventually he gets these people to find him. And you see the guy and he's out in this park and he's going up to a bunch of homeless people. And he's giving them an option. He's saying, do you want this sandwich, which is obviously nourishment and food for now? Or do you want this lotto ticket where you can potentially make millions and could really be awesome for you? And kind of surprisingly, in my opinion, most of the people pick the lottery ticket, and he gets very frustrated saying like, you know what, you could have survived off of this, but you took this risk with very little chance of payoff and you have nothing for it. So the point obviously is supposed to be there where you shouldn't be as risky with your money or just with your options, because if you play the safe route, you're going to be better off because you're not likely to be successful just taking this lottery option because it's going to be a fail ultimately. And I think they were all failed lottery tickets, so none of them paid off. And there's only like 1 or 2 people maybe that grabbed the sandwich. Then we have the 2 people that 456 hired to tail this guy, chase after him. He winds up capturing them and has them play this game of rock, paper, scissors. It's kind of a unique spin on it. I don't think I've ever heard of it. It's like rock, paper, scissors, -1. It seemed like you threw like 2 different signs, and then when he says -1, you have to like take one away. So then the remaining sign on both sides is what's left as far as you versing each other. And they're playing Russian roulette with it, but there's only 1 bullet in it. And every time he respins it, so there's a little chance of them getting shot. But then he ups the ante and says there's 5 bullets now, so you're pretty likely to get shot at this point. I'm a little surprised you would pick this. Maybe I don't understand the game entirely, but the one guy picks both of the same option. He picks 2 rocks. I feel like if you do that, that locks you into not being able to like switch up, and your opponent clearly knows what to play against them. But either way, he does that, and then the other guy winds up sacrificing himself. So kind of a cool scene where you expect, oh, this person lost, and his opponent's like, no, I can't do this, and he chooses not to -1, which results in him losing by default and him getting killed from that. Number 456 then shows up and has a Russian roulette game with the con man. Kind of a cool showdown between the 2 of them. It was pretty obvious at this point you're not going to kill off the main character this early, but it was still a tense scene where they're going back and forth and really trying to call each other out for chickening out of the game, and they stick with it. And sure enough, the last round has the bullet in it, and the guy winds up shooting himself. The cop from Season 1 then shows up. I don't know how entirely this guy survived. He got shot and like fell off the cliff or whatever. And you have him, number 456, and the surviving rock, paper, scissors guy kind of team up to try to destroy the organization. And they wind up putting a tracker on number 456 and trying to pretty much use him as bait. He winds up going into the limo of the bad guys, and he's talking to the front man through the like speaker system. And he's being tailed by his friends. They wind up shooting the tires of those guys. And he agrees, yeah, I'll join the game because he has this tracker that he put on one of his teeth. He like pulled his tooth out earlier and put this tracker on. So he feels confident that, hey, if I go in here, they're going to be able to infiltrate the base and pretty much spoil the operation entirely, which you kind of knew going into this, like, this isn't going to work. He actually had a tracker on him from the bad guys earlier in the show that he cuts out in the bathroom. This kid like walks in on him and he's like, hey, sorry, man, give me a few minutes. But either way, he winds up going to the game and is back in the Squid Game with a whole new cast of characters. And he realizes pretty shortly thereafter, he takes the tooth out and realizes the tracker's not on him. And we kind of cut back and forth between the two parties of the cop and the rock, paper, scissors guy and that whole team who is trying to relocate 456 because the tracker obviously was put on somebody else. And that, as I mentioned, that story is a little bit weak because you kind of just cut back and forth. They're trying to figure out, they're getting like frustrated, it's not working, stuff's like blowing up in front of them. But the main storyline with the actual game is interesting. So we cut back to 456. They're back at red light, green light. He actually sees one of his friends there that he knows. I think the guy from season 1 that was like playing the racetrack with him at the beginning. I think it's that guy who's there. And he's trying to really tell everybody, hey, listen to me. Here's the rules of the game. Follow it. Obviously, as you'd expect, there's a lot of people that are really skeptical of him. And same as last time, some people wind up moving, getting shot. A lot of bodies go flying. You kind of see the bad guy here. He like pushes some people, so he intentionally gets them killed. And 456 tries to save some guy, but he winds up getting shot anyway. We then have this kind of side plot with this girl who is selected to be one of the Squid Game hosts. So she's wearing the pink outfit with one of the shapes on her head. And there's kind of a unique spin here where it seems like they're taking the organs of some of these people who are getting killed. And she's decided to shoot the people in a way that's destroying the organs. And some of the other people running the game are mad at her and they're telling her to stop it. So there's a little bit of conflict and side story going on there. The big twist with Season 2 is after each time they play a game, the group as a whole can decide, do we want to continue playing the game or do we want to stop now? And if you stop, you actually divide the money amongst everybody equally. So a little bit different, a little bit more incentive to actually leave this time, kind of proving the point that even when you're offered something, people get greedy, similar to the situation with the homeless people wanting the lottery ticket. People are greedy. They always want more. When you give them a good deal, it's like, no, give me more of a good deal. So get the point here is kind of the message they're trying to send overall. So they're doing the vote as far as staying or leaving, and 456 tries to make a case of, hey, get out of here. I've done this game before. You don't want to be a part of this. This is awful. And we get down to the numbers. So he starts off voting himself, and we go down from there. I kind of saw this situation coming, but we're getting down to the wire, and we can tell there's somebody hiding behind the last few people, and it's a tie vote at this point. And sure enough, we see number 1 come up. I was a little bit unsure. I was going to be like, is this going to be the old man from season 1 again? But no, it wasn't. It was a different villain playing that role. So it was the actual frontman himself in the game here, presumably because 456 is back. He wants to then participate as well because he wants to be able to control the game as well as 456 controlling the game. But he wants a voting, stay and continue playing. So they're then forced to play the next game. You can definitely tell this is more of a modern audience here because a lot of the people in debt in this situation are from some like massive crypto scam that actually one of the other people there wound up putting on, and it sounds like he lost as well. But a bunch of people are mad that they lost all his money in crypto. So definitely trying to take a modern take on why people are in debt at this point. Then you obviously have 456 who thinks he knows the route of games coming forward. He's telling them, hey, we're gonna have this honeycomb game where you have these shapes, pick the triangle, and it is not a game he's seen before. So there's like a pentathlon type game. And during this time, we also have had some scenes where our main character has like a dream where he sees some really traumatic things. So he's definitely dealing with some PTSD from doing the first round of Squid Game. He has like this bad situation arise and wakes up from it. So he has a few of those here as well, where he sees like the triangle and like 50 triangles on this little thing. He's like really worried about it. By the way, we get this pentathlon type game where you're in a group of 5 people and you pretty much assign somebody a certain task. It sounds like these are games that are frequently played over there, but they're then given 5 minutes to complete the task. Obviously, the first few groups struggle, and we're kind of watching them struggle and saying, hey, what can we learn from it? They can walk backwards, just walking backwards instead of turning around. Small things like that they pick up on. And we kind of get some character development as well from some of the other teams. So learning about some of the players here, which they do a really great job of that. I feel like that's the challenge. When you repeat the same type of game, it's like, okay, all the characters from season 1 died pretty much. So we got to get a new cast of characters. How are you going to make me interested in them? But they do a good job getting you invested in this new group of characters, I would say. Last up, we have our main group of 5 people, and they're like breezing through it. There's like happy music playing. And we get to the front man, who's obviously somewhat of the inside man here. And he's struggling heavily. And Eventually, he gets it together. They wind up getting through with like 1 second left, similar to one of the earlier groups. So it's kind of a jarring scene, though. I saw this coming, but as soon as they finish, the opposing team across from them gets shot because they did not finish. So it goes from like celebration to being like, oh yeah, that could have happened to us. That could have been us. So interesting dichotomy there. It's also interesting to have the plot point of the guy playing the front man being inside with the actual players when we know that he's one of them. So obviously in season 1, we had the old man, and we were fooled thinking he's an actual player here, which obviously he was playing, but he was part of the game as well. This situation, we're informed ahead of time. We know that the front man is part of the game as well, and it's kind of just an interesting alternative view of how the game works, and us as the audience knowing more information than our main lead character. So unique spin on things there. They wind up having another vote, and it winds up being a lot more favorable towards staying at this point. There's like chance of one more game type stuff. So people are really greedy. They want more money. Like, that's not enough money to pay off my debt. I need way more than that. They then play a game that's kind of a unique game. It's relatively basic though, where it's like a merry-go-round and there's just a bunch of rooms, and they'll just say a number and you have to go to one of those rooms within like a certain amount of time with that number of people. So pretty basic, but it's a different number every time. So you need to split off from your group here and there. So it's like, hey, 5 people go in, hey, 3 people go in, hey, 2 people go in. So it keeps doing that. And if you're left out of the room or you have the wrong number in the room, you wind up getting shot. So some tense scenes there where some of our characters getting knocked down and things like that. It really has the most tense scene where at the end, the front man and the best friend of 456 are in a room together with some other guy who just happened to be in there. And the front man just grabs him and just snaps his neck. So turns out, I guess you could have a dead guy in there. So there was technically 2 living people in there. And you kind of get an idea of what this frontman is capable of at this point. They then obviously revote again, and there's a tie in this situation. And they're told, hey, you'll vote again tomorrow. Just think about it overnight and see what you want to do. Then they go to the bathroom area and a fight breaks out. Then we have the main villain in the games wind up dying here. So as mentioned, he seems like kind of a weak villain. And I get maybe the frontman is kind of our overall villain. So he's somewhat of a sub-boss at this point in time. He winds up dying in the bathroom there. A few other people wind up dying, but the point is the 2 sides are kind of arguing. The people that want to stay and the people that want to leave are at odds with each other. And they realize, hey, if we take out some of your numbers, we have a better chance. Separately with the people trying to track down their location, like the cop and the guy who was playing rock, paper, scissors earlier, they're trying to figure out what's going on. And you have the guy who's in charge of the boat, who's like messing with one of the drones, and somebody catches him doing it. He stabs the guy and throws him overboard. So we kind of get the idea the guy on this boat is kind of a spy, or he's working with the bad guys. So there's going to be more, I imagine, that develops there later on as well. And you would also presume maybe he was working for the front man, and that's why he saved the cop at the end of season 1 going into season 2, and that's how the cop survived. So maybe more will get uncovered there. So then 456 has a plan. He knows there's going to be a big fight that night, and the lights are going to go out. It's going to be chaos. And instead of fighting the opposing side, he says, hey, let's hide, wait for the guards to come in, and we're going to overthrow them, and we're going to try to rebel against the people running Squid Game. So that kind of works for the most part. They take the guns and they gather somewhat of a small army going up to the headquarters trying to take over things. There's a pretty intense gunfight that's taking place between them and the guards, and they're progressing slowly, and they kind of split off a little bit. 456 and his best friend go up ahead. The rest of the group tries to kind of hold off the staircase against the bad guys. Then you have this Marine who is Marine buddy with the best friend of 456. He's like, I'll go get the ammo for you guys. And he has somewhat of a Saving Private Ryan moment here, if you remember that movie, where he really freezes up. So he's just traumatized by seeing all this gunfire and all this chaos, and he's not able to help out. He really just kind of bows out at that point. Someone else tries to come down and get the extra ammo, but it's too late at that point. And then we have the front man who's up there with 2 guys and 456's best friend, and front man's like, hey, I will flank them. He goes around and he winds up shooting the 2 guys that are with him. So he shoots the good guys here, kind of revealing his hand. But 456 doesn't know about it yet. He kind of gets the walkie-talkie and gives the impression of him dying, and hears a gunshot. So 456 doesn't seem to know that the frontman is number 1, who he's been working with this whole time. So then we have them get overthrown at this point, and they're kind of just giving up. And 456 and his best friend are there, and the frontman comes up with his mask on. So he's incognito at this point, and he's like, you know what you get for this? And he shoots his best friend, and that's pretty much how the season ends, with his friend dying and him being traumatized for trying to help resolve the situation and just leading to more bloodshed and more people dying. We also get a mid-credit scene where there's a brief scene of the red light, green light situation, and there's a boy head as well. So there's a girl and the boy. Not sure what we're going to get with that, but kind of a teaser into something for season 3. So we got information that season 3 is coming out in 2025. So pretty quick turnaround for this one. I think with this season being only 7 episodes, they got the idea of these being somewhat packaged together, but just split it here, allowing a good transition point from season 2 to season 3. So we're definitely not gonna have to wait super long to get another season of Squid Game and get probably the culmination. It sounds like season 3 is probably the ending of things. Who knows if this makes a bunch of money? Obviously, there's situations where you wind up saying, hey, let's continue to push this thing. So it seems like for now, season 3 is going to be the end, but you never know with these type of things. Those are overall my thoughts of season 2. I feel like it was, as I mentioned at the beginning, relatively strong season. There were some challenges that you have with the season 2, and I feel like they met most of those and did the best they probably could, given the limitations of the first season and where you're able to go from there as far as a compelling story and one that gets us reinvested in new characters. So overall, relatively strong. Definitely recommend checking it out. So what were your thoughts on season 2? How do you think it compares to season 1? Are you interested in season 3? Just all things Squid Game. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.